Welcome to another Fresh Perspectives episode where I have the opportunity today to speak with actually one of Mind Body Therapy's very own, Etty Guggenheim, who is a licensed social worker. She works together with me in our practice here in Chicago. And thanks for making the time to do this conversation with me.
Yeah, of course. Glad to be here.
Okay, so the prompt, as usual, question for you is what is something that, from your perspective, psychologically speaking, or in the world of mental health, that you see as a challenge that is relevant and important either to our community in particular or to society at large?
Yeah, so something I think that's definitely a problem at large, but more specifically, a bigger issue in the frum community is definitely the difficulty with body image and the connection with that between eating disorders. Um, I feel like we live in a society where it's more normal to know that, like, to know that there's people on eating disorders than to know that there's people on diets than rather you not know someone. I think like if you walk into a school and ask kids if they know someone who's on a diet, you'll probably have the whole class raise their hands, right? We live in a society where you're told you're not going to get married, you're not going to be popular, you're not going to get a job. Everything is kind of based off of this concept of being thin. And I think whether or not people realize that that's where it's coming from and from that kind of non-Jewish perspective, it's seeping into the Jewish community. Um, and whether or not people realize like that's what they're saying when they're kind of talking about like losing weight and eating, watching what they're eating and cutting out sugar and cutting out carbs, like ultimately they are enforcing this kind of idea of that thinness is the ideal. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty big issue. It's affecting a lot of our teens, but our adults also, around that same issue. It's really been influencing people's low self-esteem, which then leads obviously to depression, anxiety, and all sorts of other issues. So it's just kind of one issue that leads into all the rest of it.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Is part of the implication of what you're saying that dieting is not a good thing?
100%.
Hmm.
Um, so I come from a perspective of dieting. So to be fair, like there is, like health-based dieting. And even with that, my recommendation is that you should not be doing it on your own. You need to be doing it with a dietitian. And I say specifically dietitian and not nutritionist. Um,
Can you tell
and
us the
also,
difference?
so a dietitian is actually goes to school to be licensed in basically nutritional needs. Anybody can call themselves a nutritionist.
Hmm.
So you really want to be careful with that. And then to like what their background is when you choose a dietitian, to make sure that they are some really big red flags are like if they're cutting out any food categories, um, they're likely not in a very good place to, you know, it's likely to get you into trouble.
Hmm. So, like, let's say you go to a doctor for your like yearly physical, and they tell you that you're 20 pounds over where the healthy range of your age and weight, excuse me, age and height, and gender should be. So, what does that mean for a person? How are they supposed to interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right, like I think it's about changing the mindset and the perspective, right? So I'm not saying like don't eat healthy, right? But I think the focus shifts from I'm trying to lose weight to I want to be healthy, right?
Mm.
So within that, right, there's like the food aspect of like it's not I can't have this, I can't have this, I can't have that. It's when I eat this, it makes me feel really good. When I eat that, it makes me feel really good. And when I eat that, it makes me not feel so good, right?
Mm.
And it's kind of just shifting that mindset from I need to lose weight to I want to be healthy. And that's the same thing with exercise, right? I'm not exercising to burn calories. I'm not exercising to lose weight. I'm exercising in order so that I could feel good physically, mentally, and emotionally, as science tells us are all the benefits of exercise.
So it's about eating and exercising in a way that is healthy as opposed to in a way that is about being thin. That's the point that you're emphasizing. And so a person can tell me if I'm getting this right, but meaning a person can feel uncomfortable in their body if they feel like they have excess weight or they've eaten in an unhealthy way. But it's not about thinness per se. It's about the fact that I don't feel good in the way that I'm eating and the way that my body feels. And because of that, I want to change some of my eating habits.
Yeah, 100%.
And then maybe, I guess, also just to concretize this, what you're saying, if I'm hearing correctly, is that one of the kind of litmus tests to is it about healthy eating and healthy living versus is it about an unhealthy idea of body image would be if the diet includes cutting out any particular food group, then that's an indication that it's not really about healthy eating and healthy living. It's really about an unhealthy body image idea.
Yeah, so science tells us, sorry, science tells us that our body needs all the food groups. So you can, I'm not going to go into the science with you,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there shouldn't be any food groups that you're cutting out completely. And science also tells us that going into that pattern will create issues and also like cause people to feel restricted. And when you feel restricted, it often leads to a restrictive binge cycle, which will perpetuate a whole part of what eating disorders are.
Hmm. So I know you've written a blog post that I saw about the way that parents speak about their own body and their own weight and their own eating in ways that can really create this kind of detrimental, damaging mindset about a person's body image. Can you just maybe speak to that a little bit before we transition to the second half?
Yeah, I think people just really are not aware so much of the way that they speak, right? So you want to stay away from any sort of extreme words. So anything from like, you know, I think in general, you want to stay away from commenting on people's bodies. So instead of like pointing out that somebody lost weight or they look great because they lost weight, right? We can just say they look great, or let's choose to focus on something else. I love your outfit. You look like you're doing well. Like, why do we have to talk about that weight piece? Why do we have to bring that kind of to the forefront? So that's one piece. And then also the other piece um, is how you kind of talk about your own weight with your kids. So it's something again that you don't want to be mentioning, you don't want to be talking about. You want to stay away from talking about weight, kind of talking about health overall in general.
Hmm. It seems to me that what you're saying is actually really could be really powerful because if the focus is on thinness, then you're not actually paying attention. Tell me if this is true, but you're not. This is not an area of my specialty, and I know it is yours very much. Uh, if you're focusing on the thinness as like that's the goal and that's the be all and end all, then you're really not actually paying attention to all the signs and cues and messages that your body might be sending you when you're overeating because overeating is a problem. I don't think that that you're saying that that's not a problem. And the I guess probably I think the increase in obesity or health is a problem in our world today, and that I don't think that's what you're discounting at all, but actually by focusing on that from the perspective of we need to be thin, we're actually not tuning in to hearing and listening to the way we feel when we eat in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad you said that because it brings up so like a totally different point of like intuitive eating. So this is recommended for most people, but I will preface that by saying that those with eating disorders must first be on a scheduled eating pattern before they follow intuitive eating. But intuitive eating is basically listening to your own body when it comes to hunger and fullness cues, and it will guide you in a healthy manner. So, it's just something to kind of be aware it exists. And it can be kind of amazing for people to kind of have that freedom to be able to kind of listen to their body instead of their mind.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so transitioning to the second half of this, something that you see again either in our community or society at large or both that you see as a strength, something that we're doing well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've made a lot of progress when it comes to um, stigma around mental health. We still have, some ways to go. But like just, in Chicago, thinking of here, you know, the fact that we have support groups that have opened for women, the fact that we have um, multiple, therapy options that are opening up for people to go, like that's huge. I mean, my belief is, everybody can use therapy. Some need it more than others, but everyone can benefit. And the fact that there's more, access will just help us as people. And the more we can kind of lessen that stigma.
So connecting that, I'm just curious to connect that to the first part of what you were talking about with regards to body image and eating habits, etc. Do you see that shifting in that regard also? Like, are we doing a better job at decreasing this? I know in terms of what you're saying, I think is overall with mental health, we're doing a better job at destigmatizing and opening the doors for people to get help. Is that true with regards to eating and body image stuff as well?
I would say, like, overall in the world has made progress towards that. Within the From community specifically, I feel like not so much. We
Hmm.
have some ways to go with that. But I do feel like overall in the world as a whole, we've definitely making taken progress towards moving away from thin ideals and into accepting, you know, and focusing on health.
Do you have any thoughts in particular on why we're kind of behind on that in the Frum community and how we can try and get a little better?
Yeah, I mean, some of my thoughts are specifically around like schooling. So, just going into the schools, I think they don't, and this is in some ways applicable to more than just the eating, but to overall mental health. And a lot of the schools in some they are, but in a lot of the schools they are still not talking about mental health struggles, um, in the from schools. And so because of that, there's so much shame around it and this kind of reinforced idea from the past, from parents being passed down, one to the next, is definitely like influence, and there's nothing to stop that influence, right? Um, so I think that, if we really want to make progress towards it, one, we need to be talking about these issues in the schools. I think parents need to be talking about it more with their kids. Stop using derogatory language, stop talking to yourself, stop talking about other people about this stuff. Like it should just cease to be discussed. Um, and just spread more awareness too about these issues. Um, I feel like, especially in Chicago, there's really limited knowledge and access and awareness within the Frum community as far as eating disorders and body image goes. It's really hard to find access within the Frum community to resources in this area.
Okay, so one last question. Do you have any thoughts on how the shidduch system that we have contributes to this issue and how that can potentially be shifted? Obviously, we can't solve the world, but like small pieces of this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely that's a big piece of it as well. Um, I think it's very a hard thing to kind of fix, I would say, because ultimately you can't really tell guys like, hey, like you have to take a girl, like that mindset has to be kind of framed from when they're younger. You can't kind of wait till they're older to have those kind of conversation because at this point they're kind of framed into like only these girls are pretty and anybody outside of that is kind of like excluded. Um, but to also like, Shad Khanum kind of stand up and against these kind of people, just kind of putting them in their place a little bit about, like that's not a reason to turn down a girl and definitely don't share that information with the girl that that's the reason she was turned down. I know you're trying to be helpful, like, trying to get them to realize that they need to lose weight, but like all you're doing is lowering their self-esteem and creating issues that really do not need to be there. I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure anybody in that situation is very well aware of their own weight at that point, and you're really all you're doing is creating issues.
So we're really, by the time we get to that point with the shidduchim, we're really kind of in trouble because because physical attraction is an essential part of a person connecting, and choosing their spouse, and we are culturally programmed as to what we find attractive. And so if we are culturally programmed to find only a very specific body type attractive, so then at that point we're that is how we're essentially wired to a large degree, and at that point it's going to really kind of be too late. So I guess what you're saying is like we can try and open our minds a little bit, but we really need to figure out a way to address this way earlier on in a broader context, because at that point we're kind of in a tight spot.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's sad to say, but that's kind of the realization that I feel like we're at. Um, like you said, there's only so much we can do to kind of open people's minds once they've been kind of programmed this way.
Okay, it feels like we're ending in a little bit of a dark spot, but I think it's really important. As Rav Kook writes, the truly righteous do not complain about the darkness; they increase light. They don't complain about heresy; they increase faith, and they don't complain about hopelessness; they increase hope. So somehow, hopefully, this a little bit of a darker spot in the end is only meant to contribute to hopefully what can be growth for all of us. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the conversation.